Hello, my name is Wendy. 5 years I paid their mortgage. Not once did I ask for anything back. I covered the roof, the bills, even the groceries when they said times were hard. And then one afternoon, I opened a beige folder they didn't mean for me to see. Everything was left to my stepsister. No warning, no explanation, just my name missing, like I'd never existed. They said I didn't need the house because I was the strong one. But if I was so strong, why did they spend years pretending I didn't matter? Why did they erase me so completely? And if I hadn't found that folder, would I have ever known? I never thought a beige folder could change the way I saw my family. It was a chilly Wednesday afternoon in late February, gray clouds hanging low like they hadn't moved in days. I was at my dad's place in Tacoma, same house I grew up in. The smell of old carpet and pine sol still clung to the walls like they were part of the insulation. He'd called me 2 nights ago, said the refinancing paperwork was too much to deal with, and asked if I could swing by. Said his head hurt just thinking about it. Of course, I said yes. I always did. So there I was, seated at the creaky kitchen table, surrounded by scattered envelopes, outdated utility bills, and a half-drunk mug of instant coffee. My dad, Wendell, was dozing in his recliner in the living room, TV muttering to no one. The stack of documents in front of me was barely organized, most of it yellowed or folded like it had been through more than one drawer. I sorted through it like I always did, quietly, quickly, efficiently. The silence was comfortable in the way that long-term detachment often is, and then I found it. The folder was tucked beneath a tax envelope dated 4 years back, its label typed in neat capital letters. Estate plan, last will testament. I blinked. It felt heavy, even though it was probably no more than 6 sheets thick. I hesitated, fingers tracing the edge. This wasn't part of the task, technically. But when you've been the one keeping things afloat, organizing, paying, handling, all of it, you start feeling like you're allowed to know. So I opened it, and my heart stopped. Callista's name appeared over and over. Callista Dawn Wexler, that long string of letters I'd memorized from years of hearing it praised, was listed as the sole inheritor of the property, the savings account, the vehicle titles, even the life insurance. There was one sentence that mentioned me. Just one. We love both of our daughters. That was it. No property, no percentage, no footnote. I sat back, the chair creaking beneath me as I stared down at the papers. My hands weren't shaking, but they felt cold. My name, the one that used to be on birthday cakes and PTA rosters, didn't belong anywhere in the future of this family. It wasn't just that I'd been left out, it was that they never intended to tell me. The microwave beeped behind me. I didn't flinch. In my mind, I could hear Verena's voice, syrupy and smooth. Sweetheart, we're just trying to be fair. Callista's had a rough time. I could see it all like a slideshow. Me working weekends to help cover the mortgage, wiring payments without question, answering frantic calls from my father when the roof leaked. 5 years of that. Quiet support. No demands. And this was what I got. I flipped through the pages again, half expecting to find a correction, a side note, a mistake, but it was all clean, deliberate. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until the recliner squeaked and I heard Dad's footsteps entering the kitchen. You done yet? He asked, rubbing his temple like I'd somehow caused the headache. I didn't say anything at first. I just held the folder up. This what you wanted help with? He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. No. That's just... It's not what it looks like. I didn't blink. Everything goes to Callista. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Don't read too much into it. It's more complicated than that. I nodded, still calm. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't the kind who threw things or screamed. But something in me was beginning to calcify. Is it? I asked. Wendy, he sighed, like I was being unreasonable. You've always been independent, Callista. She's different. I noticed. The folder was still in my hand. I placed it gently on the table. I've been paying your mortgage for 5 years. He didn't respond. And I'm not mentioned, except to say you love us both. More silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car door slammed. A neighbor's dog barked once. So I'm just the one who pays the bills, not the daughter who matters? He didn't answer. He looked at the floor. That silence told me everything. He didn't look at me. He just said, "You wouldn't understand." I didn't press him further, not because I lacked the words, but because I already knew where this would go. Conversations like these had a pattern in our family: subtle dismissal, then a guilt-laced apology that never quite landed, followed by a sudden change of subject. So instead, I stood, folded the folder neatly, and placed it back on the pile like nothing had happened. By the time I left the kitchen, Wendell was already pretending to fix the TV input, jabbing the remote with a little too much focus. I drove home in silence. The usual FM station didn't feel right, so I let the static hum fill the space. That night, I poured myself a glass of red, kicked off my shoes, and opened my laptop. I wasn't planning to dig, not at first, but something about that folder, it sat in my mind like a splinter. I logged into my online banking account and pulled up 5 years of mortgage transfers. Every single one was there, methodical and regular, same amount every month. I clicked on one, then another. Each payment was made to Verena's personal account. My jaw clenched. When I first agreed to help, she told me, "It'll just be temporary. We need a little help until things stabilize." Stabilize. That was the word she used when they drained my savings for a roof replacement in 2020. I checked Callista's name next. A quick search of the county property records told me what I feared. The deed had been updated last year. Verena had transferred the house to Callista, under the pretense of early estate planning. The house I'd been paying for wasn't even theirs to leave to me anymore. It was already hers. I sat back in the chair. My hand reached for the wine, but I paused. Not yet. Not until I understood how deep this went. Next, I scrolled through my email history. The emails from Verena read like grocery lists: short, cold, always urgent. "Can you cover this month's insurance? Dad needs some dental work, just a couple hundred. Callista's car broke down again. Can you help?" I always said yes, not because I was gullible, but because I believed family meant showing up. Clearly, I was the only one working with that definition. I shut the laptop. It was past midnight, but I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the blank wall. That feeling I had earlier, that hollow in my stomach, wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity. By morning, I had a plan. I made myself coffee, stronger than usual, and pulled out a legal pad. At the top, I wrote, "What I paid for." Below that, I began listing it all. Mortgage, 60 months. Roof repairs, plumbing in 2020, new washer/dryer, reimbursed, no. Grocery bills, recurring, cash. I didn't stop until 3 pages were filled, and even then I knew I was missing things. Mid-morning, I drove to the post office. I needed a printed copy of the property transfer records, something official. The clerk printed it with a thud and handed it over. Callista's name was in bold. I walked out into the crisp February air, and that's when I saw it. A Facebook post. I don't know what made me open the app, habit maybe, but there it was, right at the top. A photo of Callista sitting on the front porch of the house I'd kept running all these years. She held a mug in her lap, with Wendell smiling in the background. The caption read, "Grateful for the chance to give back. My heart has always belonged to this home." The comments were worse. "You're an angel for taking care of them. So proud of you, Callie. You're keeping that family together. Some people just disappear when they're needed, not you." My chest burned. I scrolled faster. The final comment made me freeze. It was from Verena. "She's always been our rock. Some daughters just take." Callista gives. That wasn't a misfire. That was intentional. I didn't comment. Didn't react. I just closed the app and stared at the traffic light turning red in front of me. Back at home, I opened a new folder on my computer and labeled it Legal Personal. I dropped in the PDFs of the mortgage payments, the county record, and a screenshot of the Facebook post. Then I opened a second folder, Media Strategy. I wasn't going to fight them with screaming matches and hallway arguments. I was going to let the facts speak. But first, I needed to gather them. Later that evening, I got a call from Wendell. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail that said, "Hey, just checking in. Verena said you left kind of fast the other day. Everything good?" Good? I'd never felt clearer. I put my phone face down on the kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, and I hadn't noticed. It was early, barely light out, and Tacoma was still tucked beneath that usual gray sky, the kind that made you think nothing new would ever happen again. But something had. Callista had claimed the house, not just in paper or legality, but in story, in myth. And stories, especially the ones dressed up to look like love and service, were harder to fight than facts. I hadn't meant to check Facebook that morning. It was instinct. Thumb flick. Bright screen. But then it loaded. And there it was, a picture of her ladling soup into Dad's bowl, all soft smiles and filtered glow. The caption read, "Some daughters give their all, some just disappear." The anger didn't hit right away. First came the breathlessness, like someone had pressed their hand to my chest and pushed. Beneath the post, comments poured in. "Callie, you're such a blessing. They're lucky to have you. This world needs more daughters like you. I know someone in my family who just stopped showing up to... Shameful." Every word felt like a brick. Then I saw my cousin Dana's comment. "She's always been the one keeping it together. Some people just take advantage of good hearts." That one stung more than the rest. Dana had stayed with me during her internship. I'd cooked for her, loaned her money for her first car. And here she was, piling on like I'd vanished into thin air. I scrolled further, hoping it would stop hurting if I saw enough of it. But that's never how these things work. And then, Verena's reply. "Callista gives with grace. Some just calculate. Not everyone's absence is silent." I felt heat rise in my throat. I set my phone down, not gently. That line wasn't passive-aggressive. It was a full-blown accusation wrapped in a velvet ribbon. I stood at the window for a while after that. The clouds hadn't moved. The yard was still bare, just the faint rustle of the neighbor's dog barking at nothing. But in my mind, I wasn't in the kitchen anymore. I was 10. I remembered sitting on the bottom step of the staircase with a coloring book while Callista wailed in the next room. Verena had her in her arms, rocking back and forth, whispering, "She just feels too much. She's special like that." I'd been quiet, always had been. Dad came home early that day, and I showed him the drawing I'd made for him, his favorite armchair, drawn with crayons and crooked lines. He smiled. "Thanks, kiddo," he said. Then he walked straight past me and into the other room to check on Callista. That same night, Verena told me, "You're easy. You don't need as much." That's a good thing. I'd believed her. Over the years, I'd been praised for being low maintenance, for not causing a fuss, for being good. Every time Callista lost a job or broke down over a failed relationship, I was the one who stayed on hold with the insurance company or paid the overdue utility bill, quietly, quickly. But in this story, they were now writing publicly. I was the one who abandoned them. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. I titled it, Counter-Narrative. In it, I began to list events, dates, payments, photos, emails, not for posting, not yet, just for my own clarity. I had been erased in front of an audience. And that kind of erasure, when done well, could become permanent unless someone stood up and said, "No, that's not how it happened." My inbox pinged. A new message. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another sale or some newsletter I never unsubscribed from. But the subject caught me. "You don't deserve this." It was from Morgan Sims. I hadn't seen her name in years. We went to high school together. She used to be Callista's best friend until they had a falling out over something neither of them ever talked about. I opened it. "Wendy, I know we haven't talked in forever. I saw that post. I don't know what's going on between you all, and it's not my place, but I just want you to know, Callista used to say the worst things about you behind your back. She used to say you were nothing but a shadow, that you didn't even count as real competition because you didn't fight dirty enough. I'm sorry. I should have said something back then." I read it twice, not because I was shocked, but because it was the first time someone acknowledged that what I'd been feeling all these years wasn't in my head. I responded simply, "Thank you." Then I moved all the screenshots of Callista's post and Verina's comments into a folder I renamed Reclaim. I also added the bank receipts again, and a few photos from the year I repainted their living room by myself. "You don't need to scream when you're gathering matches," I whispered to myself, and I meant it. By the time I'd archived the last screenshot and renamed the folder Reclaim, the daylight outside had quietly slipped away. The street lamps had flickered on without ceremony. From my window, I could see the shadows stretch long across the sidewalk, like they were trying to remind me how far this mess had spread. I needed to get out of my apartment, not far, just somewhere with a little less noise in my head. I grabbed my coat, keys, and drove back to my father's house. I told myself it was to pick up the last of my things, the winter box I'd left in the basement after Thanksgiving. But part of me knew I was hoping, maybe foolishly, that I'd find something else, something that hadn't been touched, erased, or rewritten. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. No lights in the living room. I let myself in with the key I still hadn't returned, stepped over the stack of Amazon boxes Verena always ordered but never opened. The hallway smelled like cinnamon potpourri that had overstayed its welcome. Downstairs, the basement was colder than I remembered. The light switch buzzed before flickering to life. I scanned the boxes, most of them labeled in Verena's cursive. Holiday, dining, linens, master, Callista, high school. Then, tucked behind an old rocking chair, I saw a small cardboard box. No label, just a single strip of masking tape across the top. When I opened it, a soft cloth fell forward. Beneath it was a stack of papers bound by a faded ribbon. The handwriting on the top envelope stopped me cold. Mom's. I sank to the floor and held the letter in both hands like it might vanish if I wasn't careful. The envelope was yellowed but intact. No date on the front, just my name in her gentle, deliberate script. I broke the seal. The letter was dated 6 days before she died. "Wendy, if you're reading this, it means something's brought you back to the basement. This house is yours. You've held it up more than you realize. I hope by now your father's seen it too, but in case he hasn't, I need you to know this in writing. Everything we built knowing you'd be the one to keep it grounded. Not flashy, not loud, but strong. There's a copy of the will enclosed. It names you as the sole heir. We updated it together in 2017, before I got too tired. If anything happens, if it gets lost, don't forget what you've done for this home, this family. You've always been more than enough. Love, Mom." I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I reached into the box again and pulled out a thin folder, beige, like the one I'd found earlier. This one was labeled in ink, "Updated Will, signed." I flipped it open, and there it was. My name, line after line, initialed, witnessed, notarized. Not Callista's, mine. It hit me like a tide. I hadn't imagined the warmth between my mother and me. I hadn't invented her belief in me. She'd known. She'd planned. I took the documents upstairs, tucked them under my arm, and drove straight to the office of the estate attorney she used. I remembered his name from a holiday card she'd once left on the fridge. "Richard Halden, thanks for everything." I called from the car. To my surprise, the receptionist remembered my mother. She was a sweet woman, always had lemon drops in her purse. Richard saw me that same afternoon. He was older now, with a slow gait and thick glasses, but kind, the kind that doesn't rush silence. I laid the documents on his desk and waited. He read in silence, nodding occasionally. Finally, he leaned back. "These are real," he said, "legally valid." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like a week. "But," he continued, "your father came in 2 days after your mother passed, said there was a misunderstanding. He asked us to pull all documents temporarily while he sorted things. He never returned." My heart dropped. "So, the original will disappeared." "We archived a digital backup for a few months," Richard said gently. But after no follow-up, it was purged per policy. We sent letters, but none were answered. I felt something snap, not rage, just fracture. They never planned to tell me, I said. I can't speak to that, he replied, sliding the papers back toward me. But this still holds weight, especially if you can prove financial contributions. I can. I left his office and drove home without music. The air outside had turned sharp, clean, like it had just rained, even though it hadn't. At my apartment, I opened the fireproof safe in my closet and gently placed the documents inside. The envelope, the letter, the will. I locked it. Then I sat at my kitchen counter, pulled out a notepad, and wrote 3 words at the top. Reclaim, record, respond. If they'd buried my name, I'd unearth it myself, one fact at a time. After locking away the will and my mother's letter, I made myself a cup of tea. I didn't drink it, just let it sit beside me, cooling slowly as I spread papers across the kitchen counter. When the space ran out, I moved to the floor. I stacked bank statements, printed receipts, maintenance records, every single trace of what I'd paid for over the last 5 years. Mortgage payments, roof repair, plumbing in the spring of 2020, new appliances, property taxes, even the times I'd covered groceries when money was tight. I laid it all out like puzzle pieces. Not to prove something to myself, I already knew. This was for them, for Wendell, for the ones who insisted I had no stake. They said I didn't need anything, I murmured, marking another yellow highlight on a credit card statement. But I gave them everything. It took hours. By the time I looked at the clock, it was past noon. I hadn't eaten, hadn't noticed. I took a photo of the spread on the floor and saved it. Then, I packed the documents into a neat, zippered portfolio and drove back to my father's house. This time, I didn't bother texting ahead. He was sitting in the den, watching a rerun of a fishing show. He didn't look surprised to see me, just slightly inconvenienced. "You come to pick up more stuff?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the screen. "No," I said, setting the portfolio on the coffee table. "I came to talk." He turned the volume down with a sigh. "All right, let's talk." I opened the binder. "These are the payments I've made on this house," I began. 5 years of mortgage, that's 60 months, Dad, plus maintenance, taxes, home insurance. When Callista's car broke down, I covered that too. When the washer went out, remember I paid the Sears guy. He shifted in his seat. "Yeah, I didn't realize it was that much." "I know you didn't." I turned the page, showed him the receipts, the account statements with his address attached to every single payment. "And while I was doing that," I continued, voice steady, "Callista was being named as the sole heir, and you sat by and let it happen." He scratched his chin. "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" I asked. "Explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, I was the one keeping this house from falling apart, and you all made sure I'd never legally own a single brick of it." Verena thought. "I didn't ask what Verena thought," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I'm talking to you, my father, the man who told me we stick together. That family's about showing up." His mouth opened, then closed again. I sat back slightly. "I'm not asking for a thank you. I'm telling you, I'm not invisible, not anymore." He looked down at the folder, then away. "You were always the one we could count on," he said quietly. "You didn't need much. Callista needed everything, I know," I said. "She always has." He nodded, almost reflexively. "I used to believe that too," I said. "That needing less made me stronger. But now I see, it just made it easier for you to ignore me." He didn't argue. I stood, gathering the papers. "This was your chance to say something, to fix it. I'm giving you that chance now, because when this goes further, I won't be quiet about it anymore." I left without waiting for a response. Back at my apartment, I scanned all the documents. I organized them into 2 digital folders, one labeled Legal, the other named Cleanup. Then I opened a new email. Subject: Let's Talk Ownership. 2. Verena.wexler@email.com. Callista.dawn@email.com. Body. Attached, you'll find financial records, property maintenance receipts, and documented proof of my full contributions to the home located at address. No accusations, no threats, just the truth. You both have 72 hours to respond before I take formal next steps. Wendy. I attached the files. Reread the email once, then hit send. I didn't expect a reply, not yet, but I'd given them a choice, one last window before the storm. They didn't reply, not a word, not a line, just silence. It was almost worse than a fight. At least a fight meant someone still had the nerve to speak to you. I waited the full 72 hours I had outlined in the email. Checked my inbox like clockwork. Nothing. On the evening of the third day, I got a text from my father. "Hey, can you come by? We need to talk." There was no signature, no warmth, just those 6 words. I drove over early the next morning. It was cold again, colder than usual for March, the kind of air that bites your fingertips even through gloves. I hadn't slept much, and my head was foggy, but I needed clarity more than comfort. The driveway was already full. Callista's SUV parked behind Verena's sedan. I parked at the curb and took a few extra moments in the car, steadying my breath. Then I walked up the steps I had paid to have repaired. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He didn't smile. Didn't even pretend to. He gestured inside. "Come in." I stepped into the living room and noticed something off right away. My boxes, my winter coats, storage containers, even the box labeled Wendy, documents, were stacked by the front door. I turned to him slowly. "What is this?" Verena walked in from the kitchen, mug in hand, robe tied too neatly. She didn't waste a second. "It's for the best, Wendy. There's too much tension. Your energy isn't good for this house." "My energy?" I repeated. "Is this a spa now? You've been aggressive, demanding," she said, "and your threats, your email, that's not how families handle things." "I stated facts," I said, "and requested a conversation. You threatened legal action." "I said nothing of the sort," I replied, voice even. "I gave you evidence. I asked for acknowledgement." Wendell stepped in now, finally speaking. "It's just gotten too hostile, sweetheart. Maybe some time away." I stared at him. "Are you asking me to leave my home?" Verena chimed in, quick as ever. "Technically, it's not your home. Not legally, not anymore." She walked over to the end table and picked up a manila envelope, handing it to me. Inside was a notice to vacate, signed by both Wendell and Callista. I looked at the dates, at the ink, at the stamp. They'd filed this 2 days ago, the day after I'd sent my email. "You knew," I said, looking at my father. "When you sent that message, you already knew." He rubbed his hands together, not meeting my eyes. "It's not personal, Wendy. Just best for everyone." "You mean Callista?" "She's family too," he said. "I'm family," I snapped. "The daughter who kept your lights on, the one who paid the mortgage while she was playing house on Instagram." Verena scoffed. "You're bitter. That's all this is, and bitterness doesn't entitle you to anything." I wanted to throw something, anything, but instead, I nodded. Slowly. Then I walked past them to the stack of boxes. No one offered to help. Not even a glance. I carried the first 2 loads to my car. The wind stung my face, but I welcomed it. It kept the tears from rising. When I came back for the last box, Callista was standing in the hallway, arms folded. She wore a sweatshirt with the house's zip code on it, probably one of those Etsy knockoffs she liked to post about. "Leaving already?" she said, voice syrupy. "That was faster than I expected." I looked her dead in the eye. "You might have stolen the deed, but you'll never have what built this place." She laughed. "What? Drywall and receipts?" I didn't answer. Just lifted the box and walked past her. Outside, snow had started falling. Light, slow, like it wasn't in a hurry to stay. I dragged my suitcase down the front steps and toward the street. From the corner of my eye, I saw the curtain shift in the front window, Verena watching. Callista, no doubt next to her. Maybe even Wendell in the background. I didn't look back. I opened the Uber app, booked a ride, and waited by the curb. When the car arrived, I loaded my things silently. The driver offered a polite nod. I nodded back. Once we were moving, I pulled out my laptop, opened the encrypted folder, added a new subfolder. Eviction. I took pictures of the notice, the boxes stacked by the door, the signatures. I recorded a quick audio note, my voice steady. Wendy Taylor. March 3rd. Evicted by family from primary residence. All property boxed by others prior to arrival. No discussion permitted. Notice to vacate received. All documentation filed. I paused, then added one more sentence. They've crossed every line. Now I'll redraw the map. It was just after 9 the next morning when I heard the knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I just stared at it, half dressed with a towel still wrapped around my damp hair. The knock came again. Short, sharp. I opened the door slowly. It was Mrs. Harlan from next door. She stood bundled in her quilted coat, her breath puffing out in little clouds. "I thought you should have this," she said, pressing a small USB drive into my palm. "It's from my door camera. I didn't know whether to say anything, but, well, I figured you might want to see for yourself." "Thank you," I said, taking it gently. She gave me a knowing look, one that didn't require explanation, and turned to go. Inside, I plugged the drive into my laptop. It took a few seconds to load. The timestamp read 2 days ago, around 4:45 p.m. The image showed Verena, standing in her pale pink coat, holding the bouquet of hydrangeas I'd left on the front porch beneath the wooden sign that still read, "In loving memory of Marion Taylor." Without hesitation, Verena dropped the flowers into the outdoor trash bin. She didn't look around, she didn't pause, just turned, fixed her scarf, and walked back inside. There was no audio, but there didn't need to be. Mrs. Harlan had renamed the file. "Guess you weren't supposed to see this." She was right. I sat back, staring at the screen, the image frozen on Verena's turned back. I'd given her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was protecting Callista, maybe she was just trying to keep peace. But this wasn't about protection. This was malice. Quiet, deliberate erasure. I saved the footage in the same encrypted folder. Then I sat still for a long while, not out of sadness, but strategy. By late afternoon, I was clearing out my inbox when a subject line stopped me cold. Tacoma Local, Community Feature Request. I opened it. It wasn't a request, it was a link, and it was already live. The headline read, "Daughter abandons aging father in inheritance dispute." Below it was a heavily edited photo of me dragging my suitcase out of the house, my jaw set, shoulders stiff. A moment caught mid-stride, but framed to look cold, even cruel. The article included quotes from Verena and Callista. "Wendy became increasingly hostile when she didn't get what she wanted," Verena said. "It's been painful watching my husband age while being treated like an obstacle." "Dad's been heartbroken," Callista added. "I've been trying to hold everything together, but she just walked out." No mention of the eviction notice. No mention of the payments. Instead, it painted me as an ungrateful, unstable woman who'd finally snapped. I could feel the blood rush to my ears. Not from embarrassment, rage. I closed the article and immediately drafted an email. I didn't send it to the publication. I sent it to Maya Reed, a legal columnist and podcast host I'd followed for years, someone who had a reputation for digging beneath spin. Subject, correction request, estate fraud story. Body, Ms. Reed, I am the woman featured in the Tacoma Local article published this afternoon. I am attaching verified documents and ring camera footage relevant to the situation described. Please review the evidence. I will speak publicly if necessary, but I believe truth deserves quiet clarity first. Attached. Mortgage and maintenance payments. Legal eviction notice. Footage of destruction of memorial flowers. Will copy dated and signed. Personal letter from Marion Taylor. I hit send. Then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. 43 minutes later. Got it. Reviewing now. The footage is damning. Can I contact you for comment tomorrow morning? I replied. Of course. Then, I closed my laptop. That night, I didn't scroll, didn't check comments, but just before bed, I whispered to the quiet room. They broadcasted lies. I submitted facts. And I slept. The next morning, before the kettle finished boiling, my phone vibrated. A notification. Footage received. Story pending validation. I didn't smile. I didn't jump up and down. I just typed one line in response. Let me know when truth becomes louder than noise. By the time I stepped into the courthouse lobby that morning, the cold had already melted off my skin, but not from the spring sun. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was focused, like someone who's been rehearsing the truth so long it had started to sound like math. Maya Reed had run the article, front page of her column, digital and print. The headline didn't yell, it just stated, "When the caregiver is the discarded one." The video clip of Verena tossing my mother's flowers went viral within hours. I didn't read the comments. That part was for the public. This was for the court. I met my lawyer Claire at the elevator. She was calm, no makeup, navy blue suit that meant business. She carried the evidence folder like it weighed more than it did. Inside the courtroom, Callista sat flanked by Verena and Wendell. Callista looked smug in her cream blouse and overly polished flats. Verena, by contrast, wore her sadness like stage makeup. Eyeliner slightly smeared, cardigan clasped at the throat. Wendell stared ahead like someone waiting for a bus. The judge, an older woman named Morton, looked over the stack of files. Her voice didn't need to raise. Claire stood. She started with the basics. Your Honor, this is a case of deliberate inheritance suppression. My client, Wendy Taylor, has provided 5 years of payment records for the mortgage, repairs, taxes, and general upkeep of the property in question. She placed copies on the clerk's desk. Additionally, she continued, we present a notarized letter and signed will from Marion Taylor, the deceased spouse of Mr. Wendell Taylor, naming Wendy Taylor as sole heir to the estate. She paused. And finally, video footage demonstrating Verena Wexler discarding a memorial left by my client in honor of her late mother. Murmurs in the courtroom were hushed quickly by Judge Morton. Verena's lawyer stammered through a weak rebuttal. Something about emotional strain and intent to share eventually. The judge raised a hand. Intent does not override action. She turned to Callista. Do you have any documented financial contribution to the property? Callista blinked. I helped clean. Judge Morton didn't flinch. That's not legally recognized. What is recognized is a notice to vacate signed by you and Mr. Taylor, delivered to the individual who paid to keep the house livable for half a decade. She let the words hang. Then, with a tone that could have split stone, she declared, This court finds in favor of Wendy Taylor. The estate will be transferred accordingly. Ms. Taylor is now the legal heir and primary executor of all properties and assets tied to this address. Callista's mouth parted, Verena gasped, and Wendell, he just bowed his head slightly. Outside the courtroom, the air was lighter. Claire shook my hand and said, You did it with dignity. I nodded. Let's go finish it. The next morning, I stood at the old kitchen counter of my childhood home, laptop open, printer humming quietly behind me. 3 letters, 3 names. Verena Wexler, Callista, Dawn Wexler, Wendell Taylor. Each envelope sealed and placed in their respective mailboxes. 30 days. That's what I gave them, a full, fair legal timeline. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to reclaim what had always been mine. I didn't watch them read the notices. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Callista was the first to leave. I heard her car rumble out of the driveway at dawn. She didn't knock, didn't send a message. Verena left next, a small U-Haul, no eye contact, no apologies. Wendell lingered. 3 days past his deadline, I found him in the garage, staring at an old fishing rod. I used to take you out to Point Defiance, he said softly. You did. You always brought trail mix, no raisins. I nodded. You always hated raisins. He looked at me. I never wanted it to end like this. It didn't have to, I replied. He left that night. And then I walked back into the house, alone. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of breath I'd held for years. The living room still had that faint scent of lavender, the one my mother used to keep in drawer sachets. I stood in the middle of the room, palms open at my sides. "This was always mine," I whispered to the air, to the walls, to the memory of the woman who knew it long before I did. They just borrowed it. The house was mine again. Legally, officially, on paper, and in deed, it bore my name alone now. But a piece of paper, no matter how final, doesn't sweep away the ghosts. It doesn't dissolve the echoes. It doesn't heal what was hollowed out. I remember the morning after Wendell's truck vanished down the street. No goodbye, no scribbled note left on the counter, just silence. The kind of silence that settles over things after a storm has stripped everything bare. I sat on the front steps with a chipped mug of tea clutched in my hands. The steam rose and twisted in the chill air as I watched the light slowly stretch across the cracked driveway. A quiet filled the space, but it wasn't peace. It wasn't the tense, uneasy quiet we'd lived in when shouting always felt just one wrong glance away. But it wasn't serenity either. It was the kind of quiet that settles after someone slams the door for the last time. A vacuum, not a bomb. I stood up eventually and stepped inside, barefoot. The floorboards creaked beneath me, familiar in their protest, like they recognized me, like they remembered the girl who used to tiptoe through these halls trying not to wake anyone. The living room was stripped clean, just as I'd left it after the movers came. The final chair Verena had insisted was hers was gone. She said it like she earned it, like I hadn't paid for it, like it was hers by virtue of louder claims. Sunlight slanted through the dusty bay window. And that's when it happened. I heard my mother. Not in sound exactly, but in sensation. A memory so vivid it felt like presence. Her laughter, soft and sudden, the way it used to catch me off guard. Her humming while folding towels. The shuffle of her worn slippers gliding across linoleum before school. She was in the walls somehow, in the corners and creaks. Each room still held a version of her, and strangely, a version of me. Not the woman I had become trying to survive Wendell or navigate Verena's moods, but the version of me before all that, before I learned to quiet myself in order to keep things calm. I climbed the stairs slowly, hand trailing along the worn banister. I opened the door to what used to be her sewing room. The fabric scraps were long gone, but the scent lingered, lavender and starch. In the back of the closet, I found a shoebox, wedged deep behind a sagging stack of old linens. Inside were 6 letters, each carefully folded and bound with a lilac ribbon, every one of them addressed to me. The first bore my full name in her looping script, Wendy Lynn Taylor. I sat down on the hardwood floor, cross-legged like a child, and unfolded the letter slowly. Wendy, if you're reading this, it means you've made it here on your own. Far enough to need to hear what I never managed to say when I was still around. You were always steady, quiet, not the loudest in the room, not the one who demanded attention, but you held everything together. You were the glue. And I should have said it while I had the chance. I should have told you how proud I was. Love, Mom. My hands trembled as I read it. Her voice, her words, each one a thread sewing me back together. I read all 6 letters. They were dated around major moments, after my college graduation, after her diagnosis, after what would be her final Christmas. She must have written them with the intention of giving them to me when the time felt right. But she never did. Instead, they waited in the dark, sealed in a box, for years. I took them out into the backyard later that afternoon, the same yard she once filled with lavender and zinnias. Now it was bare, the beds unkempt, soil hardened by winter's touch. I laid out an old quilt and read the letters again, this time out loud, as though she were sitting beside me in the sun. The tears didn't come right away. They waited until the final letter, the one she wrote without knowing it would be the last. That night, with the letters folded again and tucked safely into my bedside drawer, I wrote one of my own. It wasn't long, but it was honest. Dear Wendell, I am no longer your daughter, not out of hatred and not to cause harm, but because I cannot keep showing up in places where I am unseen. This house knows me. I know me. I hope you find peace. But I won't wait for it with you. Wendy. At dawn, I walked to the post office, slipped it into the blue metal box with trembling fingers, and exhaled. Then I walked home and opened every single window. And the air poured in, cool, cedar-scented, clean. I let it sweep through the rooms, through the corners where resentment used to crouch. In the days and weeks that followed, I began to reclaim things. I scrubbed the storage rooms clean, patched up the drywall, repainted the hallway. The pink that Verena once insisted on. Gone. I rolled on a soft gray instead, just like it used to be, like home used to feel. I enrolled in a real estate course, finally chasing down a dream I'd shelved for others' needs. I even started sketching plans to convert the basement into a small apartment. Something affordable, something stable. A place for single moms who were trying to start over, just like I was. It was quiet work, healing work. Not because I'd won some invisible battle, but because I'd finally stopped vanishing from my own life. No one came back. Verena didn't call. Callista never checked in. And Wendell. Last I heard, he moved in with a cousin up in Oregon, where the winters are mild and no one knew his daughter's name. But that was okay, because closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes in the absence of noise. Sometimes it's the silence that says everything. And this house, this home, wasn't haunted anymore. It was filled with breath, with lavender sprigs on windowsills, with warmth, with light. The past didn't disappear. The scars didn't vanish, but they didn't define me either. They reminded me of what I'd come through. And the keys? They still fit in my hand. Only now, they opened a door to something new, to something that was mine, truly mine. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who said they'd always love you. Wendy's story isn't just about inheritance. It's about boundaries, recognition, and the cost of being the one who never asked for much. So let me ask you, have you ever been treated like the backup plan in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that speak the truth. We're often too afraid to say out loud,